Hey everyone, David Aragona here with another edition of Horses to Watch, taking a look back at races from last weekend at Aqueduct, trying to find some horses that encountered adversity in their trips and could be worth betting back when they run back in the future. Well, this will be the final week that we're taking a look back at turf races in New York for quite a while, as turf season did conclude this past week in the middle of November. No turf racing in New York probably until April of next year, as long as the weather cooperates. So it'll be dirt racing from here on out. I still will look back at a couple of turf replays from this week, not because these horses are likely to run in spots where they fit in New York in the near future, but connections could ship out of town, or maybe these horses will be laid up and they'll resurface in 5 or 6 months' time. And you want to remember that they had these difficult trips from this past weekend when they do ultimately get on the turf again. So just one dirt replay to talk about that'll be sandwiched in between these two grass races. And let's begin with one of those turf replays from last Thursday, November 14th. This is the 7th race on the card. It's a first level allowance going 6 furlongs on the outer turf for fillies and mares. Let's break these runners from the gate, looking at the head-on replay of the number 2 by any other name. And really the only pertinent part of this replay to pay attention to is this run down the backstretch and into the far turn. Because you could see this horse in those Team Valor silks with the red cap. She's getting pretty good position in mid-pack right here, but things are going to start to tighten up on her as they progress down this straightaway right here. The gray horse to her outside getting put in tight. You can see not really reacting well to being in those tight quarters. She puts pressure on that horse by any other name in those green and red silks. And you can see throwing her head about, gets steadied out of there and basically just completely loses all chance by getting steady to the back of the pack here. And the critical part that you want to notice after that trouble happens is her jockey just kind of gives up. You can see Junior Alvarado not asking this mare to get back into the race at all. He looks behind them to make sure that there's nobody that's going to run to the back of them, as he is just planning to ease this horse home. And I kind of get it. I mean, she was shuffled back to last. That's not where she wanted to be in the early portion of this race. And it's really difficult to make up that kind of ground. Even if he had ridden her back into the race, what was he hoping for? To maybe complete the superfecta? So I understand the fact that he didn't really persevere with this horse the rest of the way, but I just wanted to show the rest of his head-on replay to let you see, even though this is going to show up as a loss by a significant margin in her published past performances next time, she is just getting eased through the stretch here. She is basically geared down from the halfway point all the way to the finish. So I think you do just want to draw a line through this effort for by any other name when she comes back. How good is this filly? I don't really know. She made her U.S. debut after starting her career in Australia in her start just prior to this, but that was going a 2-turn mile. That might be a little bit far for her. She is the younger half-sister to Alexandra, who was a Grade 1 winning turf sprinter in this country from several years ago. So maybe turning back to a sprint would have worked for her if the trip had worked out, and it obviously didn't this past Thursday. So she's one that you probably want to give one more shot to on the turf wherever she shows up on that surface in the future. Let's now talk about that one dirt replay that I was referring to earlier. This is Friday, November 15th, the last race of the day, race 9. Daytona Moonshine is the horse to focus on. This is a New York-bred maiden claimer for $40,000 being the tag. 1 mile on the dirt for 2-year-olds. Break these runners from the gate. And that number 7 horse, Daytona Moonshine, that we're going to talk about, actually breaks with the field. You can see him right outside of the number 6 horse there with those blinkers. He is the horse that's a chestnut with the green and yellow silks, and kind of in and amongst horses here, but you can see showing decent early speed. He's right there within about a length or a length and a half of the leaders for this opening furlong, and then he kind of starts to lose contact with the field. And you can see right here, as he starts to feel that kickback coming back in his face, he just kind of starts to take himself out of the race. And we saw something very similar happen to Daytona Moonshine on debut. He made his first start on the turf and just kind of took himself out of the race, not reacting well to having horses all around him, and wound up towards the back of the pack early. And I think kind of fooled his rider that day. It was Irad Ortiz that was on first time out and just kind of eased this horse and not really asked him for anything during the race until the very end, when just kind of, taking one last shot, set this horse down. I think gave him a tap of the crop to do some running at the end of that turf race. And this horse took off and was flying across the wire. If you look at the sectional splits that you can find through GMAX and Equibase, this horse ran his final 16th of that turf race on debut in 5.64 seconds. Still got beaten 24 lengths, and most people didn't even realize that he was running so fast at the end, but he did show some talent at the very end of that race. And you could see something similar happening here. he completely took himself out of the race on the backstretch, dropped all the way back to last. But now here, his new jockey, Manny Franco, starts to ask him for some run, and this horse is picking up his stride, increasing his frequency of strides through the stretch. And you can see it as he's kind of finishing inside of horses here. He's actually going to ultimately get up for 5th in this race, even though it looked like he was going nowhere at the top of the stretch. You could see at the bottom of your screen that number 7 Shiplet quickly making up ground on those ahead of him. There he is finishing 5th, and we'll continue to roll this a little bit past the wire, and you'll see him come back into the frame, running right up alongside the winner of this race into the clubhouse turn. He's going to come into the picture along the rail right there, running along inside of the winner. This is a horse that I think has more talent than what he's shown so far in his results. And this is a tough question for trip handicappers like me to answer. When you find a horse like this that has this latent potential that they're not showing in their races, do they have the mental capacity or the physical attributes to ever figure it out? I think Daytona Moonshine, given the fact that he got over those start troubles and showed a little more tactical speed in this race, he displayed that there is maybe some progression there, but he's going to have to take another bigger step forward in his next race. He's no superstar, and I'm sure he's maybe one of the worst horses in the Chad Brown stable right now, but he's better than his results make it seem, and he's one that I think you'll want to give an extra scrutiny to when he shows up in a similar spot next time out. Let's now finish up with one more replay, another turf race. This is from last Sunday's card, November 17th, the 5th race of the day. It is an allowance optional claimer, 62,500, the claiming tag. Nominated to other than is the allowance condition, going 9 furlongs on the turf. Let's break these runners from the gate, focusing on the number 10, Crabs and Beer. This is a horse that's shipping in from out of town for trainer Chuck Lawrence. Had previously been in the Kerry Bryan barn. This was the second start for trainer Lawrence, and he didn't run well in his first start for the new stable on synthetic, but he's much more of a turf horse. So getting back on the right surface here, but pay attention to what happens to him right here as horses start to converge from the outside, trying to save ground. He's going to clip heels right there. You can see he kind of bobbled a little bit as horses came over on him. He kind of clipped his heel in front of the horse in front of him. So that's never an ideal thing to happen to any horse in the early stages of the race, but it gets even worse from here because John Velasquez, kind of having to ankle out outside of that trouble, never has an opportunity to get back inside, and he ends up going 3 to 4 wide around both turns of this race, and that's just a trick that is always really difficult to overcome on the turf. And even worse than that, despite being while being outside, he doesn't have any cover. And I often talk about horses having good or bad cover when I do discussion of these trips on this show, and that means that it's easier for horses to relax when they're in behind another horse. They also kind of get that slipstream where the horse in front of them is breaking the wind that's coming at them, and the horses that kind of race with cover don't have to run through that wind because they're kind of following another horse into the race. Not so for Crabs and Beer here. He's going wider, so he's covering more ground than the other horses, and he doesn't have any cover. So you can see he's now traveling, pushed out 4 wide around this far turn. That's just not where you want to be. And I think all things considered, this horse actually stays on pretty well to ultimately finish 4th in this race. He's probably not as good as the winner, Swift Shore, a horse who's now 2 for 2 on the turf and has really taken a step forward since getting on this surface. Call Me Harry, also a horse in great form right now that is going out for the red-hot Rick Dutrow barn. Those two just spurted away from this field in the stretch. Nobody was catching them, but I did think it was a good sign that Crabs and Beer did keep plugging away to ultimately get up for 4th in this race. A pretty good effort and a return to form for this horse, who had run well and out of town in the past. His prior race on the Naira circuit at Saratoga over the summer also got a difficult trip that day. So I think his form is dirtied up coming out of this race. Not exactly sure where he's going to show up in the future, but one that is better than his recent results make it seem, and is a horse that I think you want to pay attention to in a similar spot, maybe even against a slightly weaker field than this next time out on the grass. Well, those are all the horses to watch for this week. If you want to follow any of these horses moving forward, you can add them to your horse watch on DRF.com and get email notifications when these horses are entered back in the future. You can also go into your DRF formulator or Timeform US past performances, open up the notes feature, and make your own trip notes about these horses. And those written notes that you input for these trips will show up right under the running line for each of these horses when they are entered back for past performances in future races. Everybody, thanks for tuning in to Horses to Watch this week. I think I'm going to skip this next week with the Thanksgiving holiday coming up, but I'll be back in a couple weeks' time with another batch of replays to analyze on Horses to Watch.
Hey, let me give you a hot tip. If you liked the content that you've seen before, click on the like and subscribe button right here. And of course, for more DRF videos like Race of the Days, Stakes previews, click on the videos right here.